lot more sense, and that's what exactly hooked the customer. Number two, transaction-based revenue. You earn a fee per transaction. This is a classic e-commerce model, and it's also how most UPI-based apps in India make money. The upside is the revenue scales directly with usage. So growth in activity translates immediately into growth into revenue. The downside is the revenue is lumpy and exposed. If order volume dips or if you get dragged into discounting war with a competitor, your margins get thin fast, sometimes faster than your forecast predicted. Number three, freemium plus paid. You give away free, genuinely useful core product and charge for premium features. So one example I can think of is Canva. The key design principle here is that you get to try the main model for free. It's not a teaser. Your free tier feels stripped down and it is frustrating, and you don't get a premium funnel. You get an abandoned app and a 1-star review. So Canva, whereas they let you try out the entire thing, the entire app completely with all the features, and then maybe after a few tries, then they say, okay, now you got to subscribe. So you get a good feel of what it's all about. Number four, which is licensing and white labeling. You sell the rights to use your intellectual property or your technology to other businesses. This is honestly actually underused by Indian founders, but it works especially well for B2B, deep tech, and API first companies, where another business can build on top of what you already built rather than building it themselves from scratch. And you'll typically find a lot of US based businesses and end up doing that. Number five, ad-based revenue. You monetize through ad views or clicks. YouTube is a textbook case example. The catch with ad-based models is that you need massive scale before this is meaningful. And it's almost never a sensible day one model. You need the audience first and the ads come later. And once the audience is large enough to actually matter, once the audience is, they're able to, they reach a certain volume, then it makes sense to the advertisers. So, and here's the real insight. I want you to, take from the slide, the most resilient startups rarely just pick one. A typical blend looks like a freemium core layered with a subscription upgrade for power users, with the occasional transaction fee on top for a specific high value action. That blend gives you multiple, somewhat independent ways for revenue to flow. So a wobble in one stream doesn't sink the whole business, which is exactly the pitfall we are going to talk about in a few minutes. So again, revenue models, some examples here: Disney, Hotstar, Zomato, Swiggy, Truecaller. Disney Hotstar, which is a subscription model. Hotstar's pricing strategy is a brilliant case study. They price their subscriptions well below typical US or UK SaaS pricing norms because they understand that Indian willingness to pay reality, as we discussed, is a little bit lower. But they make up for lower per user pricing on sheer volume. And they layer in massive spikes during live cricket, especially during the IPL season, which converts huge numbers of free users into paying subscribers in a short window, almost overnight. That's tiered, locally calibrated subscription pricing combined with a seasonal conversion engine and a genuinely elegant piece of business model design. Second, Zomato and Swiggy, which is a transaction-based revenue. Both companies earn a commission on every order plus delivery charges. So the revenue scales directly with order volume and average basket size. But here's the cautionary part of the story, which we come back to in our pitfall slide. Pure commission-based food delivery has thin margins and is exposed to discounting wars. So that's why you'll find that Swiggy, Zomato Swiggy got into Instamart for quick commerce, Genie for pickup and drop. Zomato also added another category. Um, so relying on just one transaction-based stream alone wasn't enough to build a durable, defensible business at a massive scale. Then I have the third example, which is Truecaller, which is a freemium plus paid, which I think is the cleanest example of doing freemium right in this whole list. Their first year caller ID and spam blocking, which is genuinely fully useful. People download Truecaller and get real value immediately for free and no asterisks. Their paid tier removes friction, specifically ads, rather than getting the core functionality. That's the right way to design freemium. The free tier builds a massive user base, and the paid tier sells convenience and polish, not access to actual value, which keeps the funnel honest and user base genuinely loyal. So here's a question for you to think about. Of the three patterns, calibrated subscription with seasonal spike, transaction-based diversification, or genuinely useful freemium, which one of these feels closest to what you're building and why? So we can take a second. If somebody wants to say anything about it, we're happy to listen. Okay, but just keep this in mind because we can address this again in a couple of weeks. Just think about that so that this is in your mind as to what your model is all about. Okay, pitfalls to avoid. Can we all please be in mute if you're not saying anything? Thank you. So let's talk about the pitfalls. These aren't abstract mistakes, they connect directly to what we just discussed, almost line per line. The first pitfall, designing a product before validating the customer or the pricing. So we covered this already. Don't build first and hope the pricing question sorts out itself later. The order matters, and reversing it almost never works out of the way founders hope. Second pitfall, depending solely on one revenue stream without contingencies. And here is where I want you to think back about the Zomato and Swiggy example that I'd mentioned. Both these companies eventually had to diversify into Instamart, into Genie, and into quick commerce, precisely because pure commission-based delivery wasn't enough on its own, even with a massive order volumes behind it. And that's not a hypothetical risk. That's a real company that lived through exactly this problem at a massive scale. And it's preview of something we'll dig sooner. The third pitfall, and this one is actually a little bit on the sneaky side, is ignoring the costs associated with scaling each revenue model. If you're especially in India, or okay, you're in India. So if you're thinking about anything involving physical delivery or digital payments, last mile delivery logistics are expensive and don't get cheaper just because you're processing more orders. Just think about that for a second, Payment gateway fees typically run 2 to 3% per transaction, which sounds small until you do the math on the volume. I've seen founders build a beautiful revenue forecast that completely ignores these scaling costs, and then they're shocked where their margin evaporates. And the moment they actually scale up volume, forecast the cost of scaling, not just the revenue from scaling. They almost never grow at the same rate. So coming to some actionable steps, let's call this your homework. Step 1, fill out a lean canvas model for your own venture. Work on it this week. You have some time. Identify 2 to 3 revenue models from the 5 that we just talked about. Not what's trendy, not what your competitor is doing for unrelated reasons, but what actually fits to what specifically you're trying to do. Run a pricing experiment, a landing page, a pre-order page, whatever is fastest for you. And if it is relevant to your business, segment that experiment by city, tier, try that. Willingness to pay is not, just remember, willingness to pay is different in a bigger city than it is in a smaller city. So just keep that in mind. And step number 4, which is Forecast your unit economics, your customer acquisition cost, your lifetime value, and your margins. Before you scale your spending, do this on paper before you do it with a real marketing budget, because mistakes on paper are free, whereas mistakes in a live ad campaign are not. So this normally, if we did in a classroom scenario, we would have done this, but that's okay. So the key takeaways. So these are the things I want you to leave with on this particular chapter. The business model is your engine, and your revenue strategy and is what keeps your engine scalable rather than just running. Two, the lean canvas, the business model canvas, and the scalability filter gives you three different lenses on the same underlying business. Use speed when you need speed, completeness when you need to communicate, and scalability test that runs underneath both that matter to your stage. Three, the most resilient Indian startups we looked at today, Hotstar, Zomato, Swiggy, Truecaller, all blend two or three revenue models rather than betting everything on one. And that's not a coincidence. And four, validate willingness to pay with real pricing tests, not assumptions. And remember that India's, and here specifically, willingness to pay can sharply vary by city, tier. So we'll move on to the next chapter, which is competitive analysis and market sizing, and where we'll size the actual market for whichever revenue model you've chosen today, using TAMS, SAM, SOM framework. You genuinely cannot forecast unit economics meaningfully without knowing the addressable market. So this is what we'll talk about. And we'll just take a quick 30. Let me get the next one here. Looking at the chat screen real quick. Is so far so good? Is everything okay?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question to ask. जैसे सर आपने मेंशन किया था कि प्रोडक्ट वैलिडेशन इज अ मस्ट, उसके अलावा हम पहले कुछ फ्री ट्रायल्स एंड बाकी सारी चीज़ें रन करें एंड चेक कि कस्टमर कितना विलिंग है उस प्रोडक्ट के लिए पे करने के लिए। सो अगर ये D2C मार्केट या SaaS प्रोडक्ट्स पे बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छे तरीके से अप्लाई हो जाता है, लेकिन इफ वी टॉक अबाउट द साइबर सिक्योरिटी प्रोजेक्ट्स, सो वहाँ पे एक सबसे बड़ी इशू ये आ जाती है हमारे साथ कि वहाँ कंप्लायंस वो चाहते हैं कि जब तक हम पूरी तरीके से कंप्लायंट होके उनको नहीं देंगे, पूरा एक फुल फ्लेजेड सिस्टम उनको नहीं देते हैं, तब तक वो उसको अपने सिस्टम पे डिप्लॉय तक नहीं करेंगे। तो उसमें हम कैसे उनसे वैलिडेट करवाएँ उन चीज़ों को?
तो आपका क्वेश्चन स्पेसिफिकली साइबर सिक्योरिटी के उस पे है कि भाई यू नीड टू बी कंप्लाइंट बिफोर यू कैन इवन वैलिडेट दैट।
जी, जी, सर।
ठीक है। सो let me do this. I'll get to these questions after at the end of this because I know we have lots to cover.
हुँ,
So I have that question in mind. I'll answer it at the end. Okay.
ओके सर।
Can everybody see my screen?
Not yet, sir.
Okay.
Now it's visible, sir.
It's clear? Okay. Competitive analysis and market sizing. So with this, we should be able to answer two questions with confidence, which is who else is actually competing for your customer and how big is the opportunity you're chasing? In numbers, you can defend, not numbers. You're hoping to sound impressive in a pitch meeting, but most importantly, you should be able to know your numbers right. So we'll also talk a little bit about traction and Inc42, which are both built over here. We'll also go through why this even matters. Actual intelligence platform founders use to track competitors, which is your traction and Inc42. We'll spend some time on market mapping and finding the white space. And then heart of today's session, Tam, Som, and Sam. And then we'll also spend some time on positioning and differentiation and common pitfalls and actionable steps. So most of you have come across this question, what is your TAM? And sometimes, I mean, like, especially for a starting founder, they're wondering, what this is actually all about. And sometimes you end up, answering it incorrectly. But I guess as a founder's journey, we all go through this. So we learn to pitch our product fluently, but somehow when the market sizing question comes up, we are always caught off guard, and even experienced founders who are in the second and third company have this challenge. So why does it matter so much? Understanding your competitive landscape and your true market size is foundational to building something that can actually scale. It's not about fear of competitors. Please don't think as a defensive exercise, something you just do to keep an eye on the enemy. It's about finding the white space, the genuine gaps nobody else is filling well. And it's about building a narrative that you personally believe and can defend under questioning, not just that one sounds good on a slide deck or you wrote the night before a pitch. So today we'll build that skill with the real tools and a repeatable process. And by the end of the chapter, what's your TAM should feel an easy question to answer. So let's talk about the tools. Traction and Inc42, which are two platforms. They give you generally detailed insight into emerging startups, funding rounds, and competitive movement in your sector. If you haven't used either, then try it out today. Go there, create a free account, test it out, and see what in the space of your startup. Just see what's going on over there. What is the actions that are going on over there? Crunchbase and PitchBook are the global equivalents. Useful, especially if your competitive set includes international players, and if you're benchmarking against global funding platform patterns and go-to-market strategy, which matters more than founders sometimes assume, because global capital flows into Indian startups too, and investors will compare you globally even if your customers aren't entirely domestic. But tools alone don't help you. You should actively set up like alerts. Build a simple competitor tracking dashboard. Simple basic spreadsheet also works. That you can update weekly is also fine. The actual research deliverable here isn't I know the names of my competitors. It's understanding their business models, their funding history, and their go-to-market strategy with enough depth that you can explain convincingly why your customer would pick you over them or vice versa in a single clear paragraph. Traction and Inc42 both themselves are a great example of something from what we discussed briefly. Licensing and information as a product. A B2B revenue model built entirely on packaging intelligence and selling access to it. Worth remembering as a meta example and worth noticing that the very tools you're about to use are themselves proof that this kind of business model generally works in Indian market. One more practical note, don't just look at who's currently winning. Look at who's recently raised a round but hasn't launched widely yet. Those are the competitors who will matter in 6 to 12 months, and they're far easier to track now. Before, they're crowding your search results, then after that, they've already captured mindshare and customers. So we'll talk a little bit about market mapping and landscape creation. So ideally, I would like you to create one, and I'll just show you an example also. The key word that you want to focus on is substitutes. Most founders map their direct competitors easily. That part comes naturally. What they miss is substitutes, and substitutes often are the real competition hiding in plain sight. A concrete way to think about it is imagine a meal kit delivery startup. Just to give an example. The obvious competitor is another meal kit company, right? But the real substitute, the thing that actually is competing for that customer's time and money, might just be their family cook or a neighborhood tiffin service, or that's been delivering lunch for the last 20 years. If you only map the obvious direct competitors, you will completely miss where your actual customer's alternative spending is going. And you'll build a competitive strategy that wins battles against rivals who were never your biggest threat to begin with. Once you map your direct competitors, substitutes, and adjacent players, classify them by price, by features, by distribution channel, and by target customer segment. That classification is what reveals your white space, the unmet needs or overlooked niches nobody is serving well, sitting quietly behind the players you have already mapped. And here's something, and the way I look at that is an opportunity. And here's something specifically important. White space is very often regional or linguistic, not just a feature based. A pricing model or a feature set that works beautifully in Bangalore might completely miss the mark in a tier 2 city like Indore or Coimbatore. Different price sensitivity, different language preferences, different distribution realities on the ground. A lot of founders go through that. I would encourage you to map your competitive landscape by city tier, not only by feature set, because the white space you're looking for might be sitting in the city you haven't seriously considered as of yet. One more dimension worth adding to your map is timing. A competitor that looks dominant today may have built their advantage on a market condition that's already shifting. It's a very important point. A subsidy that's expiring, a regulation that's about to change, a customer behavior that is drifting. Map not just what your competitors are now, but whether the ground underneath them is actually stable or is it actually shifting. And here is what I was talking about. There are two axes, every player in the meal kit space, and one gap nobody has claimed. Yeah, I just hope this example makes a little bit of sense. Convenience runs left to right. How much effort does the customer put in? Quality runs bottom to top. How fresh and good is the food? So the pink bubbles you see on the right is how much effort does the customer put in? Quality runs, as I mentioned, bottom to top. So basically, pink bubbles are your direct competitors. Licious, your Swiggy, Meat Shop, Big Basket, Cook, all sitting medium to high. They're all medium to high price, medium to high quality, good products. But every one of them has priced themselves out of weekly use for a middle income Indian family. So coming to the yellow bubbles, which are substitutes, which is what I was talking about. Your home cook or buy or somebody who was serving for the last 20 years, your neighborhood grocery store, she cooks, so you expect that the food is fresh, which costs fraction of any app. This is the real competition, not delicious. Then there's Zomato and Swiggy, ultra convenient but impersonal. The grocery store and tiffin service, cheap but repetitive. So the blue bubbles you see here are the adjacent players, like gourmet restaurants for special occasions, HelloFresh, which is a brand known globally, proving the model that works, which is not yet cracked India as of yet, but it's on the more expensive side, more premium. And get down to the green circle, which is the top left. High quality, affordable, low friction to cook, and it's an empty space. Nobody lives there. That is the white space. That is a space which I would call untapped. And that's why we call this particular, where I've used this market mapping for Freshbox, would be best be able to operate. It's not just we are better. It's not a pitch that says we are better than Licious. It's we are more convenient than cooking from scratch. Just as fresh as your buy or at a price that you can afford to pay every week. So this is what a market map looks like, and this is what I would also like you to have for your startup, and it will also help you sort of give you some clarity when it comes to investors, when you are able to sort of explain to them that this is my positioning in the market. Coming to the next slide, which I think somewhat everybody's favorite. um, TAM, SOM, and SAM. So just picture three nested circles, which I will bring up in my next slide. The biggest circle, which is your TAM, is nothing but the total addressable market. It's the biggest circle or the outer ring. The overall demand for your product, globally or nationally, depending on your scope. This is the number that answers how big is the category. Period. No constraints apply. Yeah, excuse me. Then in the inner circle is your SAM, or serviceable available market. Is the middle circle nested inside the TAM, and it's the portion of the total market you can actually reach, given your specific geography, your capabilities, your resources. So let's say if you're Rajasthan, if you're in Rajasthan, you would say, okay, Delhi could be part of that SAM for me, or it could be Gujarat. So it narrows TAM down to the part of this market which I could possibly serve right now or in sooner times. SOM, which is serviceable obtainable market, it's the smallest circle nested inside the SAM. It's basically the bullseye. It's the realistic share of the serviceable market you can actually capture in the next 1 to 3 years, given your current term, your funding, your execution capacity. It's today, not some idealized future. Most common mistake that you get to see in pitch decks, or I get to see in pitch decks, is that founders present their TAM as if it was their SOM. They show this giant, exciting outer ring number and say it's a multi-billion-dollar category, and they implicitly suggest that this is what they're going to be capturing soon. Investors see through this right off immediately, and it actually damages your credibility rather than building it, because it signals you haven't really done your homework. So there are two ways to actually calculate these numbers. One is the bottom-up approach, and the other one is the top-down approach. Bottom-up approach means building your number from real data, real units times price times number of addressable customers, grounded in something you can really defend line by line if somebody asks you. Top-down means taking an industry report, a big number, multiplying it by an assumed percentage share, which sounds rigorous, but is often just as wearing a nicer outfit. Bottom up is far more credible to investors because it shows your actual reasoning rather than borrowing someone else's headline figure and hoping nobody else will ask you how you got there. So let me just bring out the next slide, and you can see of what we have done with this fresh box. As you see, the bigger circle is your TAM, and then inner circle would be a SAM, and then you have your SOM. As I mentioned, that typically a bottom-up approach is usually better because it will sort of give you that level of accuracy, and then you know how you arrived at those numbers. So you start off right from, let's say, your local market. So before you can value a startup, or before you can size a funding round, before you can make any credible pitch to any investor, you need to answer one question honestly: how big is the market? TAM, SOM, and SAM is really what's going to give you the answer. So, we can talk about the, addressable market, which is nothing but, which, as I mentioned, the entire global, or it could be a national demand or a global demand for the product with no constraints applied. For fresh box, every Indian household that cooks at home, roughly 280 million households, at an average weekly food spend, which is approximately 480,000 crores. That's the outer circle, or the inner ring. Okay. SAM stands for serviceable available market, and that's where you apply your first honest filter. Not everyone in that TAM is actually reachable. Freshbox can only serve households in cities and reliable cold chain delivery, smartphones, and a food budget that allows for a premium product. That narrows TAM to an urban tier 1, tier 2 household and the right spending profile, which is 28,000 crores, which is still a huge number, but it's more honest. Then ultimately comes your SOM, which is your important number on the slide, and which is where most founders tend to inflate. It's a realistic share of your SAM. You can actually capture it in the next 1 to 3 years. It is really meant for that. Given your team, your funding, your reach, your execution capacity. So for Freshbox launching in Bangalore, Mumbai or Pune, targeting a 0.5% of the SAM in year 1 to 3, it's approximately 140 crores. So I would say that would be a bullseye, but I would say something even 2% or even 3% also would make a lot more sense. The two full filters on the left side of the circles, the TAM to SAM is filtered by geography and capability, where you can actually operate. SAM to SOM is filtered by execution and time, given what you have today and what you can realistically win. Both filters should make your numbers smaller. If your SOM is more than 5% of your SAM in year 1, you are actually being overly optimistic or unrealistic. So the tip that I like to leave here is the dark box that you see on the bottom right. So an approach to this particular methodology or this framework would be a bottom-up approach, which will be more realistic. This is what you really should look into rather than a top-down using percentages. Coming to the next slide. Positioning. Once you know your market size, you need to know exactly where you sit within relative to everyone you've just mapped. Plot yourself on a positioning matrix, 2 axes. Customers generally care about price versus value or speed versus depth. I want to stress that customers generally care about, don't pick 2 vanity metric axes that look impressive on a slide, but don't actually drive a real customer actual decision at the moment of purchase. From there, identify 2 to 3 real differentiators, things like experience, speed, affordability, or community. Then put that into one clear sentence, your unique value proposition, the thing that makes your customer choose you specifically over every alternative mapped earlier, including the substitutes. So it's not about being better on the same axis, choosing a completely different axis altogether. So Misho, for example, position itself on a radical affordability and zero investment reselling model, deliberately differentiating from Flipkart and Amazon's inventory heavy e-commerce approach with huge supply chains. So it's not, so you have to just keep that in mind as to where your positioning is. Common pitfalls to avoid. So you have 4 pitfalls to actually watch out for. First, relying on assumptions without validating competitor data. You have to check the real numbers. Don't guess and hope you're roughly right. Second, I want you to stick to this point where overestimating TAM or confusing it with SAM or SOM. If you remember nothing else from today, remember that the 3 nested circles, and never present the outer circle as if it was the inner one. No matter how tempting it seems, just be careful about it. Third, ignoring emerging players or indirect competition, including substitutes. We talked about this, the meal kit example. The real threat is often not who we'd expect, and the comfortable, obvious rival is rarely the one that actually takes your customer. Fourth, failing to adapt your positioning as the market evolves. This one is especially urgent to think about, like quick commerce, 10-minute grocery delivery, completely reshaped grocery positioning within about 18 months. So a positioning slide built in 2021 would entirely be stale today, describing a market that no longer exists in the same shape. So you want to revisit your positioning at least twice a year, not once and done and forget about it. No. Treat it as a living document, not a slide you wrote once. The 5th habit worth adopting, even though I didn't put it on the list here, is write down the date every time you update your competitive map. If you look back and realize it's been over 6 months since the last update, treat that as a signal and make sure you do it. So I'm almost done with this particular chapter. Let me just mention a few things here about the actionable steps. So here's your actionable steps. Identify and actively track 5 to 10 competitors using Traction or Crunchbase starting today. Create TAM, SAM, SOM sheet, even in a simple spreadsheet, and commit to revisiting it every 6 months on your calendar so that you know exactly what's happening in the market. Conduct real customer interviews specifically to validate market gaps that exist. Don't just assume them because you feel that this could be intuitively true. Or build a simple positioning map and use both internally and at investor conversations. Something you can pull up in 30 seconds, not something buried in an old folder. 5, your unique value proposition. Messaging has to be, test your unique value proposition messaging directly with early users or small marketing campaign, rather than assuming the words you have chosen will land you the way you intend. All right. So these are quick key takeaways. TAM, SOM, and SAM are nested circles. Never present your TAM as if it was your SOM, no matter how big the number feels. Traction and Inc42 are available. You can actually go through them and essentially sign up for that free account. 3, always map your substitutes, your adjacent players above your direct competitors. The real threat often you would see is what you want to really expect. And 4, positioning and white space. So be absolutely clear about the white space opportunity that is out there. All right. And then we'll move on to the next chapter, which is business model refinement and pivoting. I know that time-wise, we technically have only about 20 minutes, but I'll see, maybe I'll try to wrap it up sooner than later. I'm going to the next slide. Give me a second. Guessing that my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Coming to the last chapter that we're going to be talking about today is your business model refinement and pivoting. This session blends frameworks with our specific startup examples that we talked about today, and concepts to the ventures that we actually discussed. So what we'll actually cover is your refinement and pivoting as a strategy, not failure, recognizing the signals that to post or pivot, the 5 types of pivots. I'll also talk about, the India Spotlight, the famous Indian pivots, testing, validation, and lean tools for iteration, and pitfalls, actionable steps, and discussion. So I just want to know one thing as to how many people in the room have pivoted. They started off with one idea, but over a period of time, they actually ended up changing their business model. If anybody wants to say, please feel free. Because they thought the market would adapt differently, or there was some change, some trend, some feedback they received. So what I was trying to get to is that it's not a very bad thing. Pivoting is actually a very good thing. It's not something where you should feel ashamed about, or you should feel that, oh, I start off with this idea and then suddenly I feel like, this is not working and therefore everything is a failure and today is doomsday and all of that. So you should think about this as a good indicator, a good change as to where you're actually going with this going forward, where how you could sort of use this the feedback that you get or the market analysis that you do as to how it will actually help you change your existing model into something which could be totally different. So, for example, you have you have different kinds of pivots. You have something that's called a zoom in pivot. You have a zoom out pivot. You have a customer segment pivot. You have a platform pivot. You have a revenue model pivot. Now, depending on which one you end up choosing, right? Or depending on what the need is. So typically you'll find startups where you start out and it goes, you have a whole lot of revenue coming in, there's a good sale going on, and then suddenly you find that after a period of time, there is a decline, there is a high churn rate, user engagement has come down. So you have to be mindful of exactly what's going on, especially in the early stages and possibly at a later stage also, but mostly in the early stages. It's a low conversion from your interest to payment. So you come to your landing page, everybody is there on the site. You see that there are over 10,000 users that have come to your landing page, but then when they start delving deeper into making that purchase, it just doesn't happen. So you have to be mindful of that as to why is there a low conversion from your interest to payment. So also you got to be mindful as to you have 10 different features your app or software offers. Now why is it that certain particular feature could be a feature that they end up using a lot more versus what you really intended for your startup to do or for your main product to do. And you have to be mindful of that as to where this is going. Maybe it's possible that they are looking into that particular feature more actively than others, and maybe that just could be your your money winner. That is what you could actually sell to your customers. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind about um, if there is a feedback that you get on those particular features that you or that particular category that you offer of basically what you're trying to uh, offer on your website. So you just have to be mindful of those features and also keep in mind if the pricing is also right or not. And that is something that you will actually get over a consistent feedback. So coming to the pivot side of it, you have these different kinds of pivots, which is the zoom in pivot. Uh, so it's all about certain features that users already love, and then as I mentioned, that feature is really something that I'm just trying to think which example I can tell you. Like for example, let's say if you take for example a dating app, right? Nowadays, if I don't know how many of you have actually seen, but a lot of Gen Z users end up using a dating app, and they find different ways to make money. One is that they'll give you a freemium kind of a feeling where you end up looking at certain profiles, and then suddenly they'll say, oh, we want to get more profiles. You got to pay so much per week or so much per month. And let's say you do sign up for that. The next thing that comes to mind is, okay, now let's get this add-on feature where you can have these live conversations, for example, and so on and so forth. And like this, you end up. So typically, you have to do an assessment and see what feature that you're offering in your app, which is actually making you that kind of revenue. Then you have something that is called the zoom out pivot. You can have the customer segment pivot, the platform pivot, and then the revenue model pivot. So you have to see which one fits your particular model without losing any kind of interest in your core product. Coming to this is kind of interesting because you look at the different kinds of pivots over here. Look at Flipkart, for example. Now, the way I look at Flipkart is very simply this, that they are They have nothing but replicated what Amazon is or was back then. The founders were working for Amazon. They came down to Bangalore. There's a store called Mangarams. They figured out that this is the top brick and mortar store, and then they decided to try this out online. So it was a very good experiment that worked out for them. But they did not limit themselves to books alone. They moved on to other categories, and that is really what is worked out for them. So that was basically a zoom out pivot. Paytm, which basically started off as a prepaid mobile recharge, but then eventually turned out to become a digital wallet and, in a broader sense, a financial services platform. Swiggy, which also initially started out as a food delivery, but then if you look at the zoom out, they started what is called Instamart, which was your quick e-commerce or quick commerce, and then led to Genie, which is basically pick up and drop. So coming to the part which is about testing and validation before committing. So as I mentioned, I think earlier, use your landing pages, uh, your mock-ups, your MVPs, wherever you can actually gather data from. It's really, really essential to actually have that. Each of the data that you collect is really going to sort of structure what your future plan is going to be, what your future business model is going to be. You have, make sure like I mentioned, like polite customers. Your customers may not. So if you talk to family and friends, they tend to be polite to you just so that they don't discourage you. So you try to get an honest feedback from customers to understand the demand, also to understand as to what kind of pricing and willingness to pay that they're going to have. Analyze your churn. So if you are doing some kind of a subscriber model, which I had mentioned earlier, if you had Netflix and you notice that the users are dropping each month, you're dropping about 10% of the users. Why is this actually happening? Is it just happening because there are competition that is coming that is offering cheaper services or better services, or is there something else? And I think this was one case in point where Netflix said that okay, let's go ahead and start making content, and then they realized that they actually ended up getting a lot. It became a separate vertical altogether. Your net promoter score is also a very similar validation over here. Is to have like a pilot test, like a classroom, and sort of get an idea which who scores what, or actually what, in opinion of let's say a classroom like environment, as to what will be a high score to go with a certain feature or not to go with a certain feature. So these are all actually ways to sort of test and validate what you're trying to do. And as I mentioned, uh, iteration is important. Your business model canvas should be like your Bible. So let's say whenever you work on it, so you put today's date on it and you analyzed your business, go back to it in 2 months' time, maybe 3 months' time, reassess what you exactly wrote down. Was this something that was which I set out to do? Is it exactly the same case today? What has changed? Why has it changed? How do I move along with it? These are things that you got to look into. And that is why this is so important. Um, so common pitfalls to avoid when you're pivoting too early before a model is really tested. Many times I've seen this with founders where they end up pivoting too early. And just because there are several factors, including psychological factor, and I'm not joking with you. This could be true. I mean, this is true because you end up getting a feedback. Oh, this is not working. This is not working. This is not working. And then you say, okay, within a span of a month or 2 months, just because the people that you interacted with told you that this is not working, you just basically went ahead and modified your entire business model. No, you have to validate it, and don't validate it too early. Take your time. Sometimes it could be several iterations before you actually get to know what exactly is your model, what is actually working. Uh, Many times you must have come across where you end up offering a lot of features all at once. So uh, each of these features actually have to be analyzed as to what kind of value is it really bringing to their customers, and is it packaged correctly or not. You want to ensure that you're offering the right package to the customer so that the customer either continues to buy from you or is also encouraging other people to come on board. Basically, you want your business to grow, so you really want to keep this also in mind. Your internal team alignment. Many times it has happened where, this is a classic example where ego kicks in. You're the founder, you walk in there and you expect everybody in your team to actually listen to what you have to say. Just because you and your co-founder thought that it was right, or you did some analysis the previous day and came out with this conclusion. Your goal is to have everybody on board, have your team members, your early employees, all on board with what you're trying to do, so that they don't lose your vision and they don't lose interest. So you really have to keep everybody at it. And like I mentioned, the same thing. If you have your ego or policy, that could be your sunk cost right there. So actionable steps: list the top 3 signals from your own that you see in your own venture. You have a business model in front of you. I'm sure you've been at it for a very long time. Try to assess the signal each time, or possibly even once a month. Just look into if there is a change, if there's any kind of development that's going on. Obviously, you are going to be abreast with the news and information that is coming out. You're also subscribing to journals and possibly newspapers. Keep an eye out as to what's happening. Very important. Identify the 5 pivot types that we talked about. Design one small, with this test that I was talking about, it need not be a very expensive proposition. It can be a simple, straightforward landing page. You can run some interviews. Interviews is good. Back then, when I was doing some work with the National Science Foundation, we conducted 50 or 60 different interviews before we came up with what we wanted to do with our business model. So just keep that in mind, that those interviews actually matter, because you might come up with certain ideas and certain concepts which you have not even thought about. And that's where the A/B test comes in, where you can decide whether this is going to work or not going to work, and then decide on a full pivot. So essentially, align your core team to exactly what you're trying to do going forward. This I would have done in a classroom kind of exercise, but something for you to think about, a signal, to see if whether you are in the right direction or you need to pivot. And pivot is something that if things are going planned, you don't have to pivot. Pivot is only when you really come across some changes and you need to validate your current model. It could be with the pricing, for example, or certain features that you're working with, or certain costs which you didn't realize are affecting your business. These are a few things you got to actually keep in mind. So, key takeaways: pivoting is a strategic response to evidence, not an admission to failure. Don't feel bad about it. It's a good thing. Match the pivot to the actual signal. Zoom in, zoom out, segment, platform, revenue model. Test cheaply before committing fully. It's much easier to test first, or rather than build and then make the change later, because then at that point you have had people committed. Flipkart, Paytm, Swiggy are all examples where they're all pivots, and they all actually realized that there was a bigger market out there for other products that they could offer. So that actually is the end of the slideshow, and we will have some questions. Just a moment. So actually, I'll just take a few questions. I think we're actually end of time here. It's 12:30, but those of you who want to stay back and listen, by all means, please do so. I know there was one question that I was asked about cyber security, and I want to actually take my time and get back to you. Who's the gentleman who asked me that question?
It was me, soon.
Sorry, what's your name?
Himanshu.
Himanshu. Okay, Himanshu, you and I will have a separate conversation offline. It's a very specific question. It has very specific answers. So, anybody else to the topics we talked about today?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. सॉरी फॉर डिस्टर्बेंस। मेरा नेटवर्क स्पीड थोड़ा शायद स्लो है, तो कैन यू कम अगेन सर?
Sorry, say that again. Himanshu?
यस सर।
Yeah, please go ahead. नहीं हिमांशु,
मेरा
आपका तो मैं
क्वेश्चन ये था
आपको मैं
सर कि
आपका आपका और जो क्वेश्चन आपने पूछा था मेरे से, दैट आंसर आई विल गेट बैक टू यू. एनीबडी एल्स
जी
ऑनलाइन?
सर, मैंने क्वेश्चन, हेलो,
हाँ जी.
यस। सो माय क्वेश्चन वाज कि जैसे आपने बताया था कि हमें अपने बिजनेस में सबसे पहले तो सामने वाले से प्रोडक्ट वैलिडेट कराना है before कि हम
Your voice is not audible, Himanshu.
प्रोडक्ट
I think there might be an internet connection issue.
सामने
Himanshu,
वाला
we're
विलिंग टू
having some
पे
technical issues here.
है
Can I
या
make a
नहीं।
let me make a suggestion. Please address questions.
हेलो।
So Yash and Suryansh,
Yes, sir. There is one more question in the chat from Abhiraj, sir.
I'm sorry, I missed out some question. Which one? Tell me.
1 second.
I'll go with the question, Gaurav. This is
Yeah.
Abhiraj.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to actually ask regarding the blended revenues because we have done that um, before the pivot had happened, right? So my question was that if we run blended revenue streams, which I think is the right way to go, anyways, but what happens when we see one channel doing much better than, let's say, the other, right? Uh, do we then make a call if we need to invest more resources towards growing that channel, or still run with the blended because things generally become very dynamic with startups, right? At least for the first few years.
It's a very good this thing that you just pointed out. It sounds to me like this is a signal. Okay. Now, with something like this, I mean, obviously, I don't know much about your startup, but essentially, I would try to get a little bit more data from where this is going with your product offering, service or product offering, whatever you have, as to uh, is if this blended version of your sale is actually working, is what you're offering to your customer, is that actually the way customers would want to see it? Or is it something where you can offer it by itself? Now, if you find that if it's a particular offering with a particular feature within a product itself, which is doing a lot better than what it is, I would at least ensure that I would have at least a little bit more data to work with before I actually make that decision of
Hmm.
offering that particular service by itself.
Understood. Okay. Just to add to what we said, right? So we are a fintech. So our so we started off by providing access as SaaS pricing, right? But now we have blended it to doing SaaS plus usage based as well. And we are seeing more traction on the usage based pricing model as compared to people opting for, let's say, a fixed monthly SaaS fee, right?
Mhm.
Though the margins are much higher on the SaaS fee as compared to the usage based, right? So
Sure.
that's where our conundrum is currently.
And how many users are in your subscription model versus one particular so what you're basically telling me is one usage-based feature that you have is where you find that a lot of users are leaning towards.
Correct. A lot of users want to pay it on a usage basis rather than committing to a fixed monthly SaaS, even though it might make more sense on a longer term for them to be on a SaaS. But most of our, so I would say 70 to 80% of all of our users, when we started off on SaaS, we piloted a few on usage base. We introduced both after looking at that number for doing it for 6 months, and then we introduced it for both. So people now 50% of the 70% wants to move to the usage based, right? Um, it brings us more revenue at this point of time, but obviously our margins are slightly uh, lesser as compared to on a fixed SaaS model.
Got it. So what you need to look into, Abhiraj, is the value, the additional value that your monthly subscription model is providing. So if the way I would look at it is, if I were the user, I would like to be on your monthly subscription model if there were 5 other things that I'm getting for the same price that I'm paying. Okay, there are 5 other features that I'm getting for it. And that will add more value to me, which will seem like, why don't I just pay so much more a monthly? Then I can pretty much use this feature as and when I please, without costing me extra. So that will be additional value to me. I would look at that particular aspect of it. Are you missing out on any of the value that you're offering with that monthly package? So versus where you have a single feature or an item that people are sort of leaning towards, you can actually offer that at a little bit of a higher price if possible. You can look into this where you can actually, if you just want that particular feature, well, all you know that is a particular feature that could be a significant part of the product itself.
So there's something also called as price nudging, right? Like we can always, we have been told that you can always price something higher to nudge somebody else on the other side of the table.
Correct. So,
but yeah, please go on.
So again, I mean, to be quite frank with you, I wouldn't make a decision on changing or making a quick change right off the back. You need to have a certain number of users, certain number of data supporting what action you want to take. I mean, you can definitely play around with a pilot. Pilot is absolutely something that will give you the data and the feedback. Yeah, this is working for us. This is not working for us. But something that before you actually make a streamlined enterprise decision that I'm going to change this across the board, you need to have data supporting that, basically.
Understood. Okay. Fair point.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, great. So looking forward to seeing all of you in Jaipur. Hopefully, I'll be there a day before or the next day. 18th is the day for the demo day. That is the plan. And thanks for joining in the call today. And if there's any questions, please feel free to email me on the email. I just put it on the chat box. And with that, I guess I'll just bid it. Have a great Sunday. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining today.
Thank you so much, Gaurav sir, for such an insightful session.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
We truly appreciate you. We truly appreciate you taking the time and share your knowledge and experience with our founders. And also, I'm sure everyone has gained valuable insights that they'll be able to apply in their startup journey. And on behalf of Team Innovher, thank you once again for being with us today. It was a pleasure having you, sir.
Pleasure. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you for an insightful session.
Thank you.